Today's lesson on life is the generational curse, breaking the cycle. I hope you'll join me in a conversation this month as we talk about the different things that are going on in our world. I want to highlight a few things that are happening. The anger that a lot of young people are feeling, the violence that we see in the nation. We have a lot of grandparents raising grandchildren while a lot of our young adults are still having children. We see a lot of people who are seeking something and they're still searching. We want to talk about those things, and I hope you'll join me in a conversation on our Facebook page. It's Life Changing with Dr. Carlita Perry TV show. Add comments, add your thoughts, tell your stories so that we can hear from you. Today's topic is focusing on the generational curse. These are themes that follow us from generation to generation. Those are things that we really need to talk about so that we can heal from those things and how they play out in our lives and our families and how they sort of get into our communities and affects all of us. One of the things that I want to make sure I focus on is raising our children to be the healthy adults, because those children grow up to have marriages. Those marriages create families, and they become the foundation of our nation. I have with me, and I'd like you to welcome two very special guests, Dr. Frederica Brooks Davis and Reverend Sylvia Murphy. Welcome them to the show, please. For our guests, I would like for them actually to tell you a little bit about their work in the community. Dr. Brooks Davis.
Okay, first, thank you, Dr. Perry, for having me on your show. As she mentioned, my name is Dr. Frederica Brooks Davis, and I am a clinical psychologist. My experience is working in the church, faith-based community, but also as a consultant. I have also taught and currently teach as an adjunct professor in the Department of Psychology at Bowie State University.
Beautiful, thank you, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yes, well, you know me, I'm the assistant pastor of Oak Grove Baptist Church. Mm-hmm. My career has been in organizing communities and low-income communities. I've been in that field for over 30 years because my heart is there, and we do try and break the cycle that you're speaking of, and I'm so glad to be on the show to even talk about that.
Yes, thank you, and welcome again. And the reason why I chose these two wonderful women is because they are definitely community-based. They work in the community. They work with people to really heal some of those wounds that we're going to talk about today. There are a number of things that we see in the community. When I think about the generational themes or the generational curses, I think about education. I think about alcoholism. I think about the anger that gets passed down, teenage pregnancy, single parenthood. Those are some of the things that come to mind. When you look at the work that you're doing, what are some of the themes that stand out for you in the community?
In regards to generational patterns?
In regards to generational patterns.
I would agree. I think certainly those that you mentioned. I think also when we look at unemployment, housing situations, education, incarceration.
Yes.
I think it covers every area, even within the faith-based community.
Definitely.
And I feel the same, and the only way that we can really support that situation is to bring programs in the community, supportive programs, but we have to come together. We've been doing programs for so long. I feel now we have to do a mindset. Mm-hmm. It's the mind now. We have to change the mindset of the individuals because they're trying to pattern themselves after their mothers or after their fathers, and it's not working. And so we're trying to go after the smaller kids, because if you start there, then they have a mindset that wants change. And so I believe that if we start there, that's where we can get the change.
And we're going to come back and we're going to touch on each of those issues. I want to go back to something that you just mentioned, which is Dr. Brooks, from a clinical perspective, how do some of those things become those generational curses? And I think Reverend Murphy just alluded to some of those family pieces. But generation after generation, that's a long time coming. How does that happen so that people can know that? Because I think some people aren't even aware that it's happening in their families. Mm-hmm.
I think it's twofold. Certainly, we have the issue within the faith-based community. You often hear about generational curses. And often we believe that when Christ died and he rose again, that those curses were broken. So I think oftentimes people believe that there is no longer a curse in faith communities and with traditions. However, what we know clinically is that unless people are educated about those patterns of behavior, they're not even aware that patterns exist.
Exactly.
So therefore, what we need to do or discuss when you ask the question, how does it happen, is lack of awareness. And part of that is actually spending time and having persons do what we call, and as family genograms, whereas you are with someone who helps you to chart out what are some of the patterns we're seeing in our family. Because oftentimes we find that it's not intentional that we want to perpetuate patterns, it's lack of awareness that the patterns even exist.
And Dr. Brooks Davis is trying to steal some of my thunder, because that's part of your homework assignment that we're actually going to talk about a little bit later. But since we're on the same team, she's already started that conversation. That is one of the things that I want people to do as we wrap up this segment, is to create sort of that genogram, that family tree for themselves. And we probably use it a lot in the classroom. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's go back and talk about some of the issues, because you mentioned that awareness. And so let's make people aware. Let's dig into some of these issues. Let's take a few minutes and talk deeply about some of these issues and just how people can actually overcome, because part of breaking the cycle is awareness, and the other piece is doing something about it. So let's back up and talk about, for example, education. So real quick, I'm going to throw out a topic, and then you all give sort of your sort of advice to the people who are looking of how to change that pattern. And I will speak for myself in just a little bit, but from education, what can be done differently?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. In the work that I've done, particularly I'm thinking about in Baltimore City, working with adolescent males who were in the juvenile justice system, when you began to have the conversation about pursuing a degree in higher education, if no one in their family had a degree in higher education, it's not just the issue, do I go to college? Do I continue to maintain what I've been doing on the street? It is, how am I going to be embraced by my family or ostracized? So for some, because with all of what we're talking about in terms of education, we have to normalize it for them and show them a different way of things, with the understanding that for some people, it would in turn mean that they might be ostracized from their family. So how can I go to school when my family will look at me and say, you think you're better than we are? So I can educate this young person, but at the same time, I need to create a new support system for this person in the event they are ostracized for their family, so they are aware, but they also feel supported and they'll move forward. And mentorship is very important.
Health issues are another one that is just, integrated into our culture. It's almost become sort of a normal to have high blood pressure or diabetes. It's just what's in the family. So how do we break that cycle in modern society today for our young people who are
eating differently? That's number one. Eat differently, and that's what we're doing. We're educating our residents on eating different, choosing different food, and it's okay, but you just can't tell them to do that. You have to come in and show them and show them why. And we're working on a curriculum with Every Heartbeat is Life.
Beautiful.
And it is written for African American, and you bring it in the community, and you make community health workers out of the residents, that they may train the other residents, that when they learn how to eat differently, then they can teach someone else or even their children. And so if you don't know that, you're not going to eat differently. And we're going to try and bring in chefs to actually fix the food so that they know how to prepare it. Because if you've never eaten squash, then you don't know how to cook it.
Exactly.
I think on the other side of that, that's great that you're empowering the community, but we also need to empower them. It's a socioeconomic issue as well. So for some, it's not just about making healthier choices. It's also about what's available. So where are the gardens in my community? So for some persons, the issue is economics. I like to eat healthier, but it's cheaper if I buy food high in fat. And so some of it is educating the community and families. When you go to that grocery store, you advocate for healthier foods. So then I have the option now to come home and learn how to cook it. So I think it's a multi-system approach.
Yes, I agree.
And I agree with both of this, because this is a huge conversation we just had in one of my classrooms, and one young lady she was a little sad at the end of the conversation because she said, well, my grandmother did the best that she could, and we couldn't afford. So she was like, Dr. Perry, well, what do we do? I said, well, instead of eating the whole big plate of Hamburger Helper, you take, a couple of spoonfuls, a portion of the Hamburger Helper, and add a little salad on the side. Instead of having it with bread, have it with a salad or some fruit on the side. I said, because one of the barriers is the money. One of the barriers is our mindset, and it's a cultural piece, but we can still make the better choices even today with what you have.
Sure.
And so, we want to encourage people that even right now, there are certain things that you can do. So those are a couple of things. I have a number of things up here from the single parenting to divorce. But one of the things I want to talk about is the negative coping patterns. Coping with things in a more healthier way. Those things get passed down too. You would think that that's not in the genes, but it does. My mom was depressed, or this is how dad dealt with problems. He walked away or he drank. And so you get a lot of young people who also end up doing those same negative coping patterns. How can we change that? As you think about, you talked about the mindset and you talked about some of these sociocultural issues. How do we change those negative coping patterns so that we deal with life differently? Because once you change your mindset, it can help you to make better decisions. So it goes beyond even what we can tell them today. So what are maybe something that they can do to change those negative coping strategies?
Well, I think one is first you have to, again, show the person that your way of coping is negative without doing so in a judgmental way. And so how do I come alongside a young person and say, you don't have to eat or drink away your problems, sleep away your problems, when we realize that the family has this pattern? One way to do so is to suggest other alternatives. What are some other ways in which you can cope? And in doing so, encourage them and see the benefits of doing so. And also, I think it's educating, no matter how old you are, you can go in and change your family system. So just because this is how we've always done things, once I'm educated, I can return back to my community and I can teach a different way of doing things.
What we want. And that's what we want young people to do. We want you to learn, we want you to go get the education. And again, no matter really how old you are, learn what you need to learn and then go back and help someone else. Is there any generational curses, and this is a little bit personal, you don't have to share, that you've overcome as you think about some of the things that we've just talked about? Anything that stands out to you? I have a couple that stands out to me as I think about education. I think you mentioned there wasn't anyone in the family to, tell me about college and tell me about scholarships. And I tell my students this all the time because I want them, they say, well, nobody showed me, I don't know where to go. And so I know for many of us, we try to be mentors for a lot of our students because they don't have anybody. And so even if you don't have anyone, learn how to research, learn how to talk to people, how to find mentors, and change that pattern in your life. Become the first person, the second person that goes to college in your family. I think about poverty. Some people say, well, everybody's lived in the projects, and so I'm going to, I'll have to get an apartment too. Some people don't even know about home ownership. They don't even respect it because they've never lived in a house. I'll tell them the best way to overcome poverty is to have a good work ethic. Okay, and it doesn't matter how much money you have right now. You start teaching your children how to pick up behind themselves, how to clean up their room, how to get a job. I have some people, and nothing against people who don't want their kids to work in college, but I had to work and it was good for my soul, and because of that, I have an amazing work ethic, and that will keep you out of poverty because you don't have one title, but you have several. So anywhere I go to look for a job, I can get a job. And so you want to stay out of poverty, you learn how to work hard. And so those are a couple of things that came to mind when I think about overcoming the generational curse and breaking the cycle. I'm trying to break the cycle in my life. And so anything that comes to mind when you think about breaking the cycle in your families?
I would say, as far as my family is concerned, I think ways of coping and how we choose to cope. Because the reality is we all have something that has been transmitted in terms of our, generational patterns. And I think in terms of my family, for some, a way of coping was drinking alcohol. That was a way of coping with work. And once I come home, so for me, what I had to realize is I'm going to have to be intentional about swapping out alcohol with some other healthier form of coping, with also the realization that as we move forward, as we educate ourselves, and in the faith community, being careful that sometimes we don't see, oftentimes we don't think of religious coping as being negative. But also it can be. So in one context, it might be you're a workaholic and that's your generational pattern, or you're trying to please others. You find yourself at church and somebody is saying, oh, they just love the Lord because they're at church. They get praised for that.
Yes.
But the reality is that's a negative way of perhaps coping with your concern in your marriage.
Yes.
So you're at church all the time because your home life isn't what it is.
Exactly.
But because it's viewed in a positive way as far as religion is concerned, we celebrate that. But that pattern is no different than someone who's abusing alcohol or drugs.
Exactly. And there are several things, so much that we could talk about in this, but I want to again thank our wonderful guest, and I want to again just give them a round of applause. And so I want to wrap up by saying, as a homework assignment to the audience, one of the things that we want you to do to be aware of your generational themes and patterns in your life is what Dr. Brooks Davis mentioned, is what we call a genogram, or also a term you might have heard is called just your family tree. And it's something simple that you can create on a poster board or in a book or however you want to do it. But pick 2 or 3 things. Usually I have my students write the name up there, maybe the age or age range of each family member, starting with you. If we do a family tree, I have my students become the trunk of the tree, family become the branches. From that, ask each family member about their education, who went to college or who didn't. Ask about marital status. Are they single, married, divorced, never married, which might be, a pattern. Look at, alcoholism. Did they have a problem? If they passed away. Sometimes you don't even know why people passed away. They told you they was just old and, they was like 50. They weren't that old. And you don't know what some of those health issues are in your family. So there are things that could be passed down. And then you look for themes that stand out, things that keep popping up, things that are highlighted in your family. That can help you to figure out what your generational themes are. And if they are negative, then you can be intentional in how you deal with your stuff as you break the cycle of this generational curses that we're talking about today. Thank you so much for joining us on It's Life Changing. We'll be right back. Now time for me to speak into your life. This part of the show, I wanted to really focus on something to help you, again, continue to break those cycles. And so I entitled this, Walking in Your Own Shoes. Because if you're not careful, you won't break the cycle because you won't be walking in your own shoes. You'll be walking in somebody else's shoes, living their life out over and over again from generation to generation. I want us to live our own lives and know our worth. Recognize the generational curses in our family. They keep everybody down. There's an old African saying that says, we are, therefore I am, and I am, therefore we are. Because I rise, we all rise. I want to talk about breaking the cycle. One of the things that I want to talk about is incarceration. There's too much of that happening to our young people, and I think they're not even aware of how it happens. And so I want you to remember that it's not about the crime, but about the pain that's eating you up on the inside. And so if you aren't aware, you can walk into the same shoes that mom and dad are walking into. You might not do the same dirt, you might not do the same crime, but if you're feeling the same pain, you're gonna end up sometimes in that same situation. So if you're feeling like the world is against me, you got a lot of anger inside, and so then you feel like you can do whatever you want to do, you will find yourself doing things that you shouldn't be doing. Next thing you know, you're in the same place as dad. If you're a woman who you're looking for that unconditional love, but you can't seem to find it anywhere. And so then you end up with the wrong man, the wrong time, and he's asking you to do something because you'll do anything that he says. Even though you feel like, well, I'm not doing the same things as my mom. But if you talk to her, it was her who was missing that unconditional love as well. You can end up in the same place. Education, we talked about earlier on the show, and purpose. I'm really passionate about people finding their purpose and understanding what it is that they're supposed to do. Some people feel like they're not smart enough to go to college, so therefore they don't even fill out the application. Some people feel like, well, who can I be? You can be anything that you want to be. Even if you don't want to go to college, I want you to know that you have other options. You can go to the military, you can go to college, go to a 2-year school, go to a trade school, join the workforce. don't lay around the house. Don't just do nothing with your life. Be a productive part of society. Give something back of yourself. I promise you it'll be worth it. I had to put this one in here, breaking the cycle also, because it's too many also young people who are having babies. And so without, I think thinking about a relationship at all, I actually heard a young man say, well, I don't really want to be in a relationship. I just want to be a dad. And although that's a great thing, it's not such a great thing that you don't even want to be with the young woman, that you just want to have a baby so that you can have a son. I don't think that that's right. I want you to think about that for just a second. Babies, I want to say, are so wonderful and such a blessing, but I got to tell people a few things. Babies don't give love. They need love. Babies don't make you feel like you fit in. Babies shouldn't be a way to increase your finances. A baby can't save your relationship. And they don't choose their parents. You choose them. So the next time you find yourself calling them a name or telling them you look just like your daddy, I want you to recognize where that stuff comes from. Lastly, we have to recognize that babies can't provide some of these young people the love that they think that they're trying to get. Only God and you. And one of the secrets that I want you to know is that God already loved you. He already died on the cross. And so you don't have to do anything for his love. So the only thing left is that you have to do is to love yourself. I want you to understand some of these things about relationships and trust issues. My students come to me all the time trying to break the cycle of their relationships because, their aunt or their mom, they're bitter about relationships. So they have trust issues. So we have these old men telling these young men, you don't need no woman. You don't need to be married. Look at me, look at my life. Don't do that, because he going home to his lonely house eating his cardboard box dinner, okay? And you at home looking across the table at your wife wondering what went wrong. What's wrong with your life? Because somebody else made you feel like what you have is not good enough. Then you have the young women in the same boat listening to those people who are bitter. I don't mean no disrespect, Mom, okay? But I'm sorry, don't be so bitter that you share that. If you've been through a bad situation, share the best of who you are. Don't pass on that bitterness so that now she doesn't trust anyone. Make sure you share the best of who you are and the best of what you've been through, and tell her why you don't love her father. Tell her why that relationship didn't work. Don't make it so that all relationships are bad. We can all learn something from our past relationships. Share a little bit of that. We have a lot of older women who say, we talked about this before, I can do bad all by myself, but why would you want to? I want to make sure that we pass on the good things, the best of who we are. Lastly, I want to make sure that we're walking in our own shoes because we're worth it. I want you to know you deserve a great life, that you are called to be something great, that you are called to do your own thing. Even if it's something that your family's been through, you don't have to go through that. And so figure out what it is that your family's going through, whether it be divorce, whether it be incarceration, whether it be drugs or alcohol, whether it be just that sort of the coping strategies with eating too much food or filling yourself up with all those bad things. Figure out what the patterns are. Awareness truly is key, but action is where the change happens. If you're going to break the cycle of the things that you're going through in your life, it has to start with you. Once you break the cycle in your life, you break the cycle in your family. I wish you well. God bless you. I love you. We'll see you next time. It's now time for our community resources. I'm so excited to have with me a very special guest, Ms. Rakita Fofana, who is the Youth Outreach Coordinator at Suffolk Parks and Recreation Center. Everybody welcome her. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about what you do at Suffolk Parks and Recreation.
Well, I am the Youth Outreach Coordinator, as you stated, Rakita Fofana. I'm actually the citywide Youth Outreach Coordinator, but I'm housed out of Parks and Recreation. Okay. And my job is pretty much to provide resources for youth, for families, bridging gaps, things that people oftentimes aren't aware are available. Wonderful. I try to provide those sources to them.
So give us an example of some of the resources that might be available to some of the youth.
Well, we have different activities. Within Parks and Recreation, we have everything from after school and before programs. We offer summer camps for everyone from 5-year-olds to 15-year-olds.
Oh, okay.
We have a mentor program, which is available for our teenage youth within the city as well.
Wonderful. And so for the parents, you also have some family activities as well?
Absolutely. We do everything from family bingo nights, which is, of course, a great way to get everybody involved and win prizes, which is always a winner. We even offer nights to give families a chance to have time alone, where we'll keep the kids for Friday night.
That is nice.
And the parents can go out to have dinner or whatever they choose to do.
Okay.
So we offer a variety of programs.
Okay, you hear that, parents? Time away from the kids, family fun night. Those are things that are important. So I want to thank you for being here, because in talking about these generational themes, one of the things I think that families are getting away from is time together.
Right.
And so I want to thank you all for providing that family time. I know also there's ways to get exercise there.
Absolutely.
Just little things that you can do. I know a lot of people think that it costs a lot of money, but actually being a part of Suffolk Parks and Recreation doesn't cost that much.
No, it's actually very minimal. Our adult membership is only $20 a year. Our youth membership is only $10 a year.
A year.
A year.
That is beautiful.
We do have a freestanding facility, East Suffolk, and we have a new facility that will hopefully be opening the end of this month.
Okay.
In Wellyville.
Wonderful.
So we're excited about that as well.
Wonderful. So tell us where you're located.
We're at 134 South 6th Street here in downtown Suffolk.
Okay. And if they need to reach you, do you have a phone number or website where they can go?
Absolutely. My number is 757-514-4503, and our website is www.suffolkva.us/parks.
Thank you again so much for being on the show, and thank you for being a
having me.
resource in the community.
We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you so much again for watching It's Life Changer. I hope that we provided you with a little bit of peace today. Remember that peace does not mean to be where there's no noise, trouble, or hard work, but to be in the midst of those things and still be calm in your heart. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.